Well, hello. Thanks for joining us for Make Heaven Crowded. This is the podcast where we dive deep at Team FBC on what we talked about on Sunday, but also what's going on in our community and across the entire world. Today's a little bit different because we're not going to talk at all about what we talked about on Sunday, mainly because we didn't have to talk on Sunday. We actually got a Sunday where we got to relax. Oh, let me say as well, Pastor Jordan, Pastor Luke, Pastor Roger.
Can you imagine if this was just Roger's podcast?
I've been trying to make it that way.
Would be
forever. Yeah, you two are my subordinates on the podcasting. But I say we took a morning off. We were still running around. But Jasper Kent out of Georgia for our Disciple Now weekend, he gave the word on Sunday. A lot of great feedback on how Jasper did. And so
we kind of turned into ushers, especially second service, because, man, it was a packed house.
Yeah, Usher.
Yeah,
Ludacris and Lil Jon, the three. Yeah, that's what we were on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so,
anyways, I don't even know.
I know. Before your time.
Isn't one of those guys from St. Louis?
That's Nelly.
Oh, that's Nelly.
Yeah,
See,
Nelly.
that's how much I know.
Exactly. Yeah, you love your rap. You're Marky Mark
Oh,
over here.
if you only knew what rap I know,
I'm sure. Yeah.
From when it first came out.
Ice Baby.
No.
Anyways, so Jasper gave the word on Sunday, did a great job, and it kind of gives us an opportunity to talk a little bit about discipleship and just our role as Christians when it comes to what discipleship looks like. So, Luke, I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, no, Jasper, he made me feel old, but also it's kind of crazy. He said it was his 6th year coming down and doing D Now.
That's nuts.
So, when we first started this in, 2022? 2021. 2021 was our first year doing this. I remember we were in the theater. We had 79 students for the first one.
And I remember looking at you and thinking, we will never go up from this.
Yeah,
There's no way.
This was
still a great number.
The most incredible.
Yeah.
I remember one of my first weeks on staff was you and I talking to Mike Lawson because we did the games with Mike Lawson, rest in peace, and that was 21. So.
Yeah, so we had 79 that first one, and Jasper's like, man, what's going on in this community? And then
how great that was.
And we invited him back next year, and the next year we had 130 something, so we almost doubled, in 1 year. And then the next year we had 180.
Yeah.
And then since then, after that one, we about went through the floor of the theater because they were jumping up and down so loud.
Is that how great thou art?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I recorded that.
Awesome.
That was
awesome
outstanding.
Yeah.
I was crying.
Yeah.
It was so beautiful.
It was awesome.
So that was our last one in the theater, and after we about went through the floor, we moved it to the sanctuary, and since then been over 260 kids, this weekend.
And as we've talked, the percentage standpoint of that,
10.25.
over 10% of our town's youth from or 6th grade to senior is in our building. That sounds like 10%, maybe that's a lot, but when you go and take that to a Kansas City or something like that, that would mean that 200,000 kids would be in one church. So on a percentage standpoint per capita, it's absolutely off the charts insane. These are numbers that places don't get.
Jesse Runge, who's one of our boys small group leaders for high school, and he talked to me at church. He said there's something going on that this community has never seen when it comes. Like these boys, and of course he's with the boys,
senior boys,
said that they're on fire in a way that I didn't think was possible.
Which then you see the fire that comes out of him when he's just so amped up with how these guys are eating it up.
It's just a movement. It is a movement. That's going
his
on.
group. He was talking about they were up till the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. just having a prayer, like just praying over each other. And they said you had senior boys just crying, like literally just crying over each other.
It's unheard
just
of.
Praying for one another.
If I was the small group leader, they'd be like, where's the leader? And I would be snoring in the other room. They're all in the room crying or, praying, and I'm just sawing logs.
Yeah. But I'm thinking back to, I'm going way back, but
when you were
would have never seen or heard of something like that.
Senior Roger was a Christian. Yeah. Senior Roger was staying up at 3 a.m. to play Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Like, it's a movement.
And I remember my church camp days, and I remember those things, and there was not that happening.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, and the Lord wrecked me on Saturday night whenever, we were counting it up, and we figured out, oh my gosh, it's 10% of our students.
Yeah.
And it just hit me. He said, bring me the 10% and watch what I do with the rest. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I really am excited about
that.
What's
Was
about to
cool.
take place in our community.
That was very cool. When I heard you say that, I'm like, ooh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a neat way to put it. But I got wrecked when Jasper was done and the praise team came out, and this is a moment of reflection and a time for you to bring what you've got to the altar. So he opened up the stage as an altar. And just the kids that flooded down, it was just like, dang.
And I think you need to know, there's nobody singing at that point.
No,
it is literally just they're playing piano and the background music, and it's just a moment where we're in the presence of the Lord, and the altar is full.
Yeah.
Like kids are just going up and taking things to him. So there was no like music draw. There was nothing. It was just total, complete surrender.
Yeah.
And it was powerful.
And to the courage it would take, and I'm obviously I'm looking at the perspective from my day, where the courage to step out like that in front of that many of your peers and go forward, because the first one that walks up, all eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking 250 kids, so 500 eyes are on you walking forward to go kneel at the altar.
Yeah.
That's hard. That takes a lot of courage to step up and go, I'm going. I don't care what anybody thinks of me. I'm going up there.
Yeah.
But then what that opened the floodgates of other kids. I mean, it was just once one went, it was just like, whoom, they all wanted to go up there.
Yeah.
And it was just like, man, there's something in there. There's just something, the courage that kids are having to be just, they're courageous about their faith.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool. And for Jesse Runge, he then gets just fired up.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the gospel when you see it move, is that you can look at a photo or a video and in some way say, I was a part of that. And so for Jesse to see that and to say, every kid that's at that altar, I have a role in that. And, we're former youth pastors, and to see what we kind of inherited 5-6 years ago, of course, Luke was before me, but then to see kind of the how that has just become the norm. And even when we do worship nights, who is the one that leads the altar more often than not? It's our students. They're the first ones that are heading to the altar. That is unheard of in the culture of church, and yet that is what we are seeing. And I just keep going back to there is actual revival that is occurring, and it's being spearheaded by the youngest, by the kids, by the teenagers. And man, it literally gives me goosebumps.
Yeah. Well, then it doesn't stop here, because now, and even before D now, we're hearing about middle schoolers that are having Bible studies of their own. They're gathering in the hallway and circling up and praying at school.
Yeah.
Same thing in the high school as well. We're hearing about senior boys that are putting together ministry group to do Bible studies together and to dig in and then take that and be missional with it. Again, unheard of.
Yeah.
That does not happen normally.
So the one thing I would want parents to hear is we love sometimes inadvertently trashing this generation. And we talk about the stuff that happens in culture with furries and all this stuff and gender identity and all that stuff. Don't sell this generation too short, because they have the ability and the potential to do what is happening right now.
Yeah, well, even in talking with Jasper at the start of it, just, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for coming back. And he's like, I can't believe you keep asking me back.
Yeah.
But what we were talking about is just the numbers, but then he started talking about, it was so encouraging to him was that he's seeing the kids from the early ones now becoming leaders.
Yeah.
And it's a system. It's like a farm team.
And what you mean by that, the ones that have graduated high school are now coming back and serving as the young adult leaders.
Young adult leaders.
Well, to give it to context, when he came here, and I'll use Jalen Keller, was a 7th grader. Jalen Keller is now graduating high school. So she is now, a senior. So literally when he came here, for a student that has been here since the first D now, they have been with Jasper every single year from middle school and now until high school.
Yeah.
So
Jasper was talking about his age on stage. He's like, I feel like I'm getting old. Was he 30, knocking on the door 40? And I'm like,
bro,
whatever,
he
bro.
looks the exact same.
Yeah, he does.
He doesn't gain weight.
And so in that, I was just kind of like, okay, these kids, do they feel an older guy is relevant to them? And so I asked my kids, what do you guys think of Jasper? Their immediate response is, he is so awesome.
They love him.
They love him.
You know how long he preached on Saturday night?
Oh, man, that was long. We were there a while.
75 minutes. That's how long he was on stage.
And here's the thing.
Preaching.
They were, and that was the other thing I was so blown away by is these kids are dog tired.
Yeah.
I mean, the night
Haven't
before, I know my son had 90 minutes. I mean, he went it down to minutes on how much sleep he got.
Yeah.
Then there are activities all day long, service projects, games, and then they're sitting in a dark, warm room at 8 o'clock at night. And they are fully engaged, because when Jasper would say certain things, they would just burst out in cheers. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, they're still listening.
Yeah.
You know?
Preach for 70. That's not how long the service was, 75 minutes. He was on stage preaching for 75 minutes.
There was worship on both ends of that.
Yeah.
Which kind of flies in the face of all the data that we've created that says that the
1 hour.
attention span of children, it's 20. You have 20 minutes, blah blah blah. Well, apparently they're the exception because that was not the case.
He was talking about this, and I was talking to Jasper. How much time did Moses spend face to face with God on top of the mountain?
Oh my goodness, almost 70 days or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
But how quick do you think that felt for Moses? Like being in his
Yeah.
presence. And so that's what he's talking
The
about.
Israelites thought he was never coming back, but
And I'm going to be talking
he was
about
gone
it.
so long.
I'm preaching to the students this Wednesday to give Tori and Gabe, a Wednesday off. And what I'm going to be talking about is actually what Jasper and I talked about is, we talk about this spiritual high of, what we had this weekend going on. Well, they're not called to stay on top of the mountain. Moses came down off the mountain to take what he had learned from God to the rest of the people. It is how do you, when you come down off the mountain, sustain the experience you had when you saw God's face on top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And so, why were they able to sit there for 75 minutes? Well, they're fully engulfed in the presence of the Lord, seeking His face. So now, how do they take that and go down off the mountain? That's what we're talking about Wednesday. But phenomenal week. Like we talked about 10%. But what fired me up too was those baptisms. You have somebody like Isaac Vargas, who just got baptized a year ago at our worship night. Now he's turning around, and who we got to baptize, I'm telling you, me, Jax Glendenning, some of the football leaders, we've been praying over that kid for the past 3 years on the football team.
Yeah,
and so now to see Isaac help lead him to the Lord and then get to step forward and baptize him. Madison, I remember she got baptized, 2 years ago, and now to see her get to baptize people, Tori and everything that she's been through. Gabe, the first conversation we had about him coming on as a middle school guy was last year's D now. And so look what's happened in a full year rotation and what God's done in his life. So just phenomenal how the Lord has worked.
I will say the number one greatest act of courage and bravery was when Brennan crowd surfed.
That was insane. You missed it. It was absolutely
No, I didn't miss it. And that
electric.
I didn't miss it. That the moment I stepped into Sunday morning, Johnny Vaughn that's all he wanted to talk about was when Brennan crowd surfed before.
It was
crowd surfed
very
before.
strategic. Did you see the group he jumped in?
Oh
It was
yeah,
all
the football players, and Jesse Runge
Yeah,
was right there front
yeah.
and center. Yeah,
He was fine.
He wasn't overly courageous, but it still takes that. They still got to catch him. They got to understand what he's about to do and not just watch him go thud.
I did hear people are like, you know what, we want to see Roger crowd surf.
Ooh,
and so next year maybe we'll get to see that.
Yeah. No, I'm sad I missed Katie Hopkins' call.
There's going to be some of those seniors that are graduates, so we need a new crop of strong dudes up front to.
No, Katie Hopkins called me. She was like, I missed her call, and I thought she just butt dialed me. She's like, no, I was going to have you come and MC, and I'm like, I'm not cool. I remember when I was in middle school, these kids thought I was cool. I don't think this generation of kids think I'm cool. I don't think I'm getting.
I got to MC. I just had to lay down all the rules and regulations, and so that's all I did.
Yeah, so you're not cool either.
Yeah,
it helped you started off with some Simon Says.
Yeah,
that got them. Energized.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Fun.
High schoolers love Simon Says.
They were actually having fun.
We're just not. We're not cool anymore. I don't know.
Well, he was up there with Katie doing Simon Says and
Katie's
with
and
the
they
crowd,
thought-
and they were
they
having
thought
a
it was
great
cool.
time.
Yeah,
it was a good warm up.
But I just even Sunday morning as I'm looking and I'm like, of course I see some of my middle schoolers that I bring up Jalen Keller, but I see them now and they're knocking on the door to adulthood and what God is doing in their lives, and it just. Again, just to say, I had a role in this. I mean, and to all of the people at church, they had a role in some way to be a part of what God is doing in our church. And so for those listening, and you're a part of the team here at Team FBC, we consider you a part of the family. You have a role in what God is doing. And we just need to take a step back and realize how humbling that is of what we're experiencing.
And it's very vital. We have to pass this down to the next generation. And man, I think our prospects are looking good for the future.
Yeah,
with
I
what
feel
we're
good.
doing.
I feel great.
And so our whole saying here is we want to help make heaven crowded. I certainly believe it got a lot more crowded this weekend. Definitely some seeds planted, if not. And then
more to come.
More to come on that. But Jasper did a great job on Sunday. He talked about the whole theme this weekend was run your race. And he hammered it home on finish your race. Yeah. Talking about this race of faith, and that finish line is the promised land, which we know is heaven. But he took that back to the Israelites, how God delivered them out of Egypt, out of slavery, to go to this place called the promised land. And there was only 2 people that left Egypt that got to finish the race and actually experience the promised land. And so he talked about those 2 people being Caleb and Joshua and the faith that it took for them, to go through the wilderness and finish the race and receive the promised land. So he did a great job on Sunday with that message.
Oh, it was fantastic. And when he, in that conversation, I was talking to him at the start of D Now, I asked him what he was going to preach on for Sunday. I was a little selfish in asking that because I needed to get small group questions out
Yep.
for the adults. But when he dropped I'm preaching out of Numbers 13 and 14, I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Numbers. Here one Sunday, you pick numbers.
You pick numbers? Yeah. And I even joked with him, like, whoa, you're going deep in the Old Testament. Of all the books that everybody quits their reading plan on is Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and he's going right into the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
But it was excellent because there are parts of those books that they go back to the story. It's not just the begots or the laws or the curtain of the temple needs to be this dimension. It's a good story, and man, the story of Caleb and Joshua is fantastic. And even just one of the simple things you were talking about, the wandering in the desert. When you go and dig into all that, God literally was so ticked off that he made an entire generation of Israelites die off.
Yeah.
Because you're not going then. If you don't trust in me, then you don't get it.
Yeah.
And only 2 of you were trusting in me, Joshua and Caleb. Those are the only 2 that get to go. And the rest of you, I'm waiting until you die off for the next generation to come along, and then they get to experience the promised land.
And his quote in there that got me was, Joshua and Caleb, they remembered. They remembered what it was like to be in slavery. They also remembered everything God provided for them while they were in the wilderness. And they said, if God did all of this, we can take down whatever enemy is over here in the promised land, because I'm telling you, that land is flowing with milk and honey. Everybody else, what they chose, they said, hey, I am more scared of the battle in front of me than what it was like to live in slavery. And they chose they wanted the slavery route over the battle that was in front of them.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a perfect illustration. How many of us choose the slavery of our sin because it's easy, it's comfortable, it's what we know, instead of facing that battle on a daily basis so that we can get to the promised land.
And this idea of them experiencing God, it's not like, I felt the presence of God. No, they were led out of Egypt by a pillar of fire during day or at night and smoke, the presence of God, and then they watched him part the Red Sea, and the entire Egyptian army gets swallowed up by it, and they lived and survived, and they kept going. These were, absolutely phenomenal experiences.
They saw
of
manna
God's
fall
presence.
from heaven. They saw water come from a rock. They saw all these things happen, and they're like,
I don't trust God's going to stick with this. Huh? It's phenomenal story.
But don't we do the same?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we do the same.
But I absolutely love the story of Joshua and Caleb. Caleb is not spoken of as much because we don't have a book of Caleb or anything like that. But even in that whole deal that Jasper was talking about with Caleb, it's a mirror thing with Joshua. I'd say even more so with Joshua.
Yeah.
He was Moses' assistant.
Yeah.
And so when we think of Moses and everything Moses experienced with God on the mountain, going to the tent of meeting, and the presence of God would come down. And one of my favorite verses is that Exodus 33, I think it's 11, where it says the presence of God comes down to the tent of meeting. Moses would leave his tent, and God and Moses would talk to one another like friends. Guess who else is right there in all that? Joshua. Yeah. He's experienced, because then when Moses leaves the tent, it says, and Joshua stayed.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, if he stayed, that means he was there from
present,
the get-go.
yeah.
He was present. When Moses went on top of the mountain.
You think his ear was like on the tent?
No, he's in there experiencing it right there next to him.
He didn't have to eavesdrop.
No, and then every time Moses went up the mountain, and in total was like 70 some odd days worth, Joshua's right there with him. Mm. He experienced God like that firsthand. And so it makes sense why from Moses it went to Joshua. Yeah. And then you read how Joshua managed the Israelites. Man, he did not mess around.
Yeah, so the story, God finally sending them in to scout out the promised land, the land of Canaan. And he sends somebody representing each tribe.
Yep.
The only two to come back and give a positive report was Caleb and Joshua. So they all acted out of faith. Joshua being the assistant to Moses. But then look at Caleb. And what tribe did he represent?
Benjamin, right?
Caleb.
Judah. Yeah.
So that is significant as well, that he represented the tribe of Judah. He represented his tribe well.
Yeah.
And it being the tribe of Judah, because later on, which line would Jesus come from?
No coincidences, is there?
The tribe of Judah.
Yeah, it's all prophetic.
Yeah.
But I think in that, for me, I take away, and this is being former youth pastors, is like my message to students every time was, like, how are you going to use your experience? It's great having, we use the church term camp high. Like, you go to camp, you cry your eyes out, you say, God, I'm ready to follow you. And then Monday you're back at school, or for adults, even men's and women's conference, you're back at work. And then the mundane tasks take
world
over.
slaps you in the face.
Yeah. And I think that, we as humans yearn for experience. We all want our own burning bush. And sometimes we get angry or aggravated at God by saying, well, you did that for Moses, you did that for Joshua, you did that for all of these people that I read about in the story. You just showed up in a way. I mean, even Thomas, you put your hand out. Why won't you do that for me? That we all yearn for these experiences and to say, man, if only I had this experience, then I would be ready to go. But throughout Scripture, we see people that are having the most supernatural experiences ever. And sometimes, because the way the world works, they don't utilize that experience. And so,
or it fades.
Yes, or it fades and they go back to like I said, the mundane tasks of life. And so, like, my challenge is, how do you use that? How are you able to catapult that? And as you said, eventually to get off the mountain and say, okay, I've had that face-to-face with God. I've had that experience, and now I'm going to go out and I'm going to utilize that to hopefully transform in other people's lives what God has transformed in my own life.
Yeah. And there's the challenge.
Yeah.
Well, this all I think this is all good segue as we're going in, because again, they're running the race to completion, to the promised land. For us, we have a place set before us that we're running our race and our finish line. It's also a promised land because he promises us heaven. And so we get a lot of questions about heaven as pastors.
Yeah.
And, we want to make heaven crowded. We kind of joke around that heaven can't get crowded. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make the population even higher. Like, we're trying to do whatever we can to bring people there. So let's have a discussion on heaven today. Let's talk a little bit about
I actually had brought this up. So this past weekend, and I shared this on Facebook. It's public at this point, but we got the news that my dad's cancer. It's gotten to the point now where there's no further treatment that's going to be able to fight it. It's taken over, and so we made the decision with Dad that spend the remaining moments of your life at home, around family, in peace. And so we drove. It's my stepmom, my sister, my two brothers, myself. We picked Dad up. We're driving home, and we have an hour theological conversation on heaven. And my dad, of all people, is everything he's been through, but he's talking about what he thinks heaven is and what it looks like. And then it gets brought up to me. Well, what do I think heaven looks like? And so that's a question, like, as I'm wrestling everything with what has gone on with my dad, of like, okay, when we die and we go to the other side. And this is a question that as pastors we get: what is heaven going to be like? And the interesting part is that Jesus, yes, he does give some descriptors of what heaven is going to look like, but by and large, we don't see like an exhaustive list of here is everything that you are going to experience in heaven. And so, again, everything that I went through, or that I have been going through with our family, and just people being interested, I thought it raised a good question of, what is heaven? I mean, we know it's where we go as those that are saved, that we go after we die. But what is it going to look like? What are we going to experience? One question I had when I was a new Christian is, eventually, don't you get bored just being in, like, what happens 30 billion years in heaven? Like, eventually, like, what all is there going to, what are we going to do in heaven? What does it consist of? So I think that leads kind of a good conversation that we can have.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Jordan, what do you think heaven's going to be like?
Well, it's kind of funny because, I've heard people say when someone passes away that they will be doing their favorite hobby in heaven. Oh, they're getting to play golf in heaven. And you're just like, no, they're not.
There'll be all the fried shit, He loved ranch dressing. There'll be ranch dressing in heaven.
No, that's not how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And, just you were talking about, what are you going to do for 30 billion, for literally eternity? You can say 30 billion years and it's a blip on the radar of eternity. What are we going to be doing this whole time? We're going to be glorifying God.
Yeah.
And then so when you just leave it at that, people could easily just go, that's it?
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, what do you mean that's it?
Yeah.
We're going to be in the presence of God.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to see his face for the first time. We're going to experience him and his magnificence and Christ's magnificence with gazillions of other believers in worship. That's going to be honking big.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we will, so there were moments at D now when we're worshiping, and you're just, I don't know I know there was times for me, and I'm sure it was for others, you kind of just like, I don't want this to end. This is fantastic. I feel this is moving. I feel this is amazing. Now take that and amplify it by quadrillion, you know, in what it will be like in heaven. I don't think that'll ever get old.
It reminds me of a conversation after Stephen Strauss died, who was one of my mentors. And I remember my wife and I, Caitlin, we were driving home from Springfield, and we were talking about Steve being in heaven. And she asked me, she said, do you think Steve is like watching you? I mean, do you think Steve is kind of, and I told, my response was, I think Steve is very preoccupied right now, gazing his eyes at something far greater than me. I think he
cannot take his eyes off.
He is so focused on his Father and his Savior at the right hand of the Father. And I know I will see Stephen again, but I think right now his focus is not on my mundane tasks of life. I think Steve right now is focused solely on on my Father and his Father in heaven, and that to me gives me far more comfort to know that one day I will be next to Stephen doing the exact same thing.
Well, and that made me think of another question I hear. Do you think we'll know each other? What about your spouse? And I'm literally like, I don't think we'll care.
Yeah, exactly.
You won't care. Yeah. It's going to be so overwhelming. You're like, I don't care.
Exactly.
I mean, it's amazing.
It's very, very true.
Well, that's what, we talk about what heaven's going to be like. What we do know is we're going to receive a new heaven and a new earth.
Yeah.
And what many people believe is that new heaven, that new earth that we receive, is everything being restored back to the original
Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
It's the new Eden.
And so we can, what we're implying in there is if we're restoring it back to the Garden of Eden, what was man's role in the Garden of Eden?
Yep.
And I think Adam and Eve, when they were created, what were they created to do? God created them with a purpose, worship him, to serve, but also for discovery, joy, creativity, and to reign over the rest of creation. And so I don't think it'll be boring because I just think we'll still have a lot to do. Yes, we're going to be fully restored in the presence of the Lord, and we're going to receive new bodies.
Which is important because I think there's a misconception even from Christians that we're just going to be these spiritual orbs
like
almost floating around heaven.
Yeah.
And no, we will receive
glorified body, what we have right now.
Yeah.
I'll never forget doing the funeral of 5-year-old Jonathan Rand, who died of cancer, and telling his mom, like, you will see your son again, but he will not look like what you see here on earth.
But I think that's important to get into. Why is it important to understand that we will receive new bodies? Why?
Because this body will not work in heaven. It's a sinful flesh.
Correct.
We have to be glorified into the state of what
this
Christ
body.
is glorified
This body has asthma. This body has. I mean, certain bodies have cancer. Certain bodies have disease, and that won't exist in heaven.
But why can't we
handle the holiness of God?
Why can't we just be spiritual beings? Why is it important for God to give us new bodies?
I think there's several reasons.
I think it's just about how He created us. We were an actual being of, I don't know if it's flesh, but that's just how He made us in our original state.
In His image.
In His image.
Correct.
Yeah, with a correctly spirit embodied body, I guess. It's really hard to explain. And that's where it's the glorified version.
So you eliminate the fallenness of what occurred in the garden. You
gone.
take that away, and now this is what the intention of the creation was before our own flesh and our own sinful temptation took over.
Yep. And so I'd say all that's true, also because we're getting a new earth. But I also think when Jesus rose from the grave, why did his full body have to rise? Like his whole body had to rise from the grave.
Because he was fully resurrected.
To overcome death.
And so what he's getting at is Jesus had to do that because Satan doesn't get any victory over any part. Yeah, and so the same thing, why do we have to, we have a body resurrection, we receive new bodies, is because Satan doesn't get to win anything over us either. No part of God's creation does he get to win, including our bodies. And so that's why it's important for us to understand we receive a new body as part of the new creation because Satan's not going to win at all.
Nothing.
He's not going to win anything. Yeah.
But even the glorified state, it goes back to God's original intention of, or how he originally intended for humanity to be. It must have been pretty stinking amazing for him to go through and be willing to sacrifice himself like he has for us to get brought back into our original state. The glorified body or this glorified state of humanity must be really cool. I mean, really awesome. Because, I mean, we look at humanity today and how many times we kind of go, really, God? You love us? We're pretty awful.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting what you said about, we say, oh, your favorite hobby is what you'll be doing in heaven. Mm-hmm. We attach all of these humanness, and I think Jesus even did this, and this is my belief. I can't give you a chapter and verse, but I believe that when Jesus was giving these understood concepts of mansions, there will be many mansions, and we think of like the
building a house for you.
Roads will be paved of gold. I'm not 100% sure that Jesus is literally saying that there will be these many and stuff like that. I think Jesus is using language that we, in our feeble brains, in our fallen world, that he understands that he is going to describe something that is so exquisite, so beautiful that our brains can understand, but knowing that when we get there, it's actually going to be infinitely greater, than even what he described. And so I think that is where Francis Chan gave this analogy in a sermon when he preached on In Heaven. He said, look at it this way, that we as humanity are a bunch of fleas that have found ourselves in this beautiful mansion that is occupied by humans and dogs and all of these things. And we as fleas are trying to understand why the humans do what they do, why the walls are the way they are, who built the walls, how are they built. In the end, we just have to accept the fact that we're just fleas, and we're never going to understand all of that. And I think for us in our flea brains that we will understand, and I can imagine Jesus just being in a circle and saying, hey, heaven's going to be great, and I can give you all these descriptors, but you just got to be there. You just got to experience it for yourself.
Well, that's what, again, going back to the being enslaved in Egypt and not having any freedom, could they even comprehend the milk and honey that was flowing in the promised land?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Probably
I don't
not.
think so.
No.
Yeah.
And then the freedom. So, but back
and they defaulted back to what they did know.
Correct.
And could possibly even have some control in.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think, as we talk about heaven, we like to think of it as just a spiritual place. But it's not just a spiritual place. What we just talked about, it's going to be a physical place.
It's a literal place, yeah.
It's a literal physical place. I think the big question comes into, we don't have all the answers here, but we can talk through it, is that's the end. That's what heaven is going to look like one day. But what does it look like until Jesus comes back? So when somebody passes away, where do they go? Do they immediately go to heaven? Or is there like a holding pattern? What does that look like in that time?
Jordan gave this is where Pastor Jordan, and you talked about Hades and paradise. And I will say that
Gehenna.
Of all the messages that we preach on, that was the one where people are walking out and thinking, I've been a Christian for 30 years. I had no earthly clue. We all assume that you die and you instantaneously, you either wake up in the arms of Jesus or you wake up in hell. But actually the Bible paints somewhat of a different picture.
Yeah, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus.
Yeah.
Not the Lazarus that was Jesus' best buddy that he raised from the dead, but a very poor and filled with sores. Yeah. Poor, awful, homeless kind of just someone they literally drag and go sit at the gate of the rich man, hoping that the rich man would give him the scraps off of his table. And Lazarus dies and goes to heaven. Well, then it gives a picture of what is heaven like. He is in the arms of Abraham. It's called paradise. But then the rich man dies and he goes to the other side. They can see each other. There's a great chasm between them. They can even communicate with one another. But one or the other cannot go to either place. There's that much distance, but yet they're able to see and communicate. But then the Bible talks about how there will be a new heaven and a new earth, or the old earth will be destroyed, and then the Hades will then be gone, because Hades is one place. Hades has both a good side and a bad side. And then that'll all go away.
I think when people hear Hades, they immediately just attribute it to
just hell.
It's just hell.
Yeah.
But Hades would be the location.
It's more just
it's
like a term for afterlife.
In Luke 23, when Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise, that we hear paradise and we just assume that's a synonym of heaven.
Yeah.
These aren't always synonyms that are being used.
Yeah, so it's really one place but two sides.
Yeah, I guess would be
And
correct.
then when Jesus returns, the earth will be destroyed, heaven will be destroyed, and a new heaven. And I was trying to find in Ezekiel describes the new Eden, and then Revelation refers to the new Eden as well at the very end. And Ezekiel, I think he gives a bit of a description of what's this river that's flowing out of the garden. It gives this imagery of the new Eden. Well, that is what God is going to recreate, or they call it the New Jerusalem as well, the Bible does. And then there is a separation, because then the final hell is called Gehenna. It is the final place, and it's the lake of fire, and there's the gnashing of teeth and torment for eternity. And it's a very different description than where we think we go right after, till all that happens. Yeah. And until you dig into that, and again, this is another one of those sermons that you preach it, and then you have several people going, yeah, are you sure? And you're like, I think I'm sure.
Yeah. That'd have been a good one to have a podcast on after.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it because we did a podcast on hell. Now we're doing a podcast on heaven. So hopefully it's sprinkled in there. But yeah, I think that's just where people don't know. People don't understand that.
So to sum that up, whenever we pass, instead of being on the streets of gold or whatever. What
Yeah.
we're understanding from that context is we go to a place called Hades, which is like a holding place. There's one side that is paradise that would represent the heaven side.
The heaven side,
And then
yeah.
we have the other side that would represent the hell side.
Yeah, and in there, Lazarus he's hanging out with Abraham. That's who their perception of understanding of we're going to go be with our father Abraham. Well, it's Jesus for us now. So, but yeah, that's who you're hanging out with, and it's going to be a great place.
Yeah,
I mean, Jesus wouldn't call it paradise if it was not a cool place, you know. But sorry, I interrupted.
But so
you.
then the question becomes, as we talked about Catholics, last week or a few weeks ago, would be, what's the difference between Hades and purgatory?
Yeah, and I immediately thought of that when you said kind of a temporary place. It's not temporary in the sense of, and help me understand purgatory correctly, it's a holding place where you're kind of correcting some bad
so that
sins.
you can get to heaven.
You can get to heaven.
Yes, it is a transcendent waiting room almost of saying, okay, I need to get this right, this right, this right. Hades is not a holding place to get to heaven.
Yeah,
your soul has already. I mean, you have not accepted Christ in your fleshly world. You are now on the other side. Unfortunately, at that point, there is no leaving Hades to get to heaven.
Yeah, and so then now the real question is in Hades, the temporary heaven or paradise, are you in a body or is it your spirit? Because we are not reunited with a glorified body yet.
Yeah.
So then now you could wonder if we are kind of spiritual orbs in this moment.
That could be it.
And waiting to be reunited. Those that have passed are reunited with their glorified body. Yeah. I don't know. We're not there to know for exactly what we look like in heaven right now.
But I think that there will be certain things from our human pattern that we will bring there, such as things like, I think we will be conscious. I think that there will be certain so then I'm thinking, well, how do you do that if you don't have all of the pieces that we have here on earth to be able to, I mean, the human conscious comes from the brain, we know that, and so if you're just a spiritual orb, you don't have a brain to be able to do that. Now, of course, the cop-out answer is, well, God can create whatever he wants. He doesn't need a brain to be able to do that, and it's a different, we're no longer in this earth. We are now outside of
But I'd argue your brain doesn't go, your soul goes to heaven. Well, there's no part of your body that doctors can say, well, this is where your soul is. We can remove your soul.
No amount of neuroscience will be able to explain where the soul is.
And now soul and heart a lot of times go together, but I mean, did your heart go and up to heaven?
Exactly, So that's where...
There's a bunch of little beating hearts floating around in heaven right now.
Again, in our flea brains, we're trying to explain things using the only thing we know, which is, the natural science, the five senses that we have. And it's like we're trying to explain calculus with our times tables that we have. Like, okay, but 8 times 8 equals 64. Hey, it's much more than what you can comprehend.
On top of that, I never took calculus, so I'm trying to explain calculus, and I never took it.
And all I know is I did good on my times tables. That's great, but we're now dealing with a different language that you're not going to be able to comprehend.
I know a little bit of algebra, but even then, I've never had to apply it.
I know zero algebra. So that being said, I think that we can sit here and we can ponder, and it's fun to talk about, but in the end, I think we're all going to have a little bit of shock when we get and say, oh, wow, you're right.
Well, and now there is a kind of a cool factor. There are people that have passed away, and if it's like I just told Bethany.
Yeah.
And I just was tipped off on a podcast talking to John Bryant, D Now. He's like, hey, I'm into this new podcast. You got to listen to this. It is this guy that has gone around the world and interviewed people that have passed away and experienced something in death, but then were brought back to life. What's crazy is just a little John could tell me is all these people that are scattered all over the world have never talked to each other. They describe the same thing.
Well, and what's interesting about I'm glad you brought up Bethany's story, because since I've heard her story and I told her story on a Sunday, every funeral I've done, I tell that's part of the funeral that I do, and it's helped so many parents and grieving families. Yeah. But I even told it to my dad on the way back from St. Louis. And to me, what's so convincing about it, is that she describes it as if it happened like it was she said it was more real than me and you talking right now. And so she said, you can choose not to believe me. But she said, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt what I experienced was heaven. The other part of it is that there were almost prophetic things happening when she was in heaven. Like, she didn't know about the verse of saying, like, the sun will shine to the right, stuff like that. There was stuff happening in her when she was in heaven that can only be explained through something that was supernatural. And so that is where, like, I used to be a doubter. Like, when I would read those books, and I would even as a Christian, I would tell Christians, hey, be very hesitant when someone starts talking about those experiences. Like, you need to go in with some level of skepticism. I think I've kind of dropped that now because I've heard some of the stories of what, she said there are colors that exist in heaven.
That's right.
You can't even, there's no words to describe the colors that you will see.
And that's crazy too, is everybody that I know that's had an experience like that, they don't care if people believe them or not.
And that's very much Bethany.
They literally don't care. It happened. If you don't believe me, who cares?
But the fascinating thing is that these people have never met. They all give a similar description. Another example that John talked about that he heard was the grass, the rocks, the trees sing the praises of God in heaven. And you're like, he goes, as the wind would blow across the grass, it's singing to God and it's praising and glorifying God. You're just like, that would be cool to see. Like, the grass is singing. It's glorifying God. Yeah. You're like, that'd be the wildest thing.
Bethany was ticked off when she woke up, and they said, "Oh, it's a miracle."
I can only imagine.
Said, Why did you take me away? And she said,
"That's how Lazarus felt like."
Oh, yeah. What am I doing?
And she said, for a split second, she said she had no clue where she was at, but she knew everything was going to be okay, and that it was all taken care of. And she said it was a peace that transcended reality, is how she described it. Yeah. And she said, in that moment, I knew exactly where I was at. So.
Yeah. Well, that was even one of the, as John has started listening to this podcast, I'm like, how are those people doing now? I mean, because I would venture to say there could be a very high rate of suicide because they want to go back.
Because it's just they yearn, because you experience this, and you've had a flavor, you've had a taste of the real thing. And I think that that's very intentional on God's part, is to say, hey, I'm going to pull the curtain back just a smidge so that you will truly know
I'd push back to the other side. I think it does the other. It actually gives them hope. So like,
True.
It says, oh, now they know.
Yeah.
They know what the finish line looks like.
Yeah.
And when you know what the finish line looks like, it's a little easier.
And it could give you pedal to the metal I'm going to get as many people to go experience this
Bethany's
as
response was, Bethany was not a public speaker. Bethany was one of my best friends before all of this happened. Bethany is the type of person that is not going to stand up and talk in front of people. But instead, what did she do? She goes to our women's conference, and she absolutely
nailed
just
it. It was amazing.
It was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
She said, because I experienced heaven for a split second, I now have a responsibility to tell as many people as I possibly can before I get to go back.
Yeah. Have you ever seen John Christ's skit on Lazarus that he's done?
No, I haven't.
But it's hilarious.
It is. He's like, can you imagine being Lazarus? He's like, you're up there in heaven.
Then
like,
you got swords again.
He's like, God's made this many mansions for me. He's out back playing basketball, and then he just hears a knock on the door. And it's just an angel saying, sir, we normally don't make this mistake, but But he's calling you back.
Yeah. Well, and here's the funny, so like a Bethany, hers was just minutes. Lazarus was 4 days.
Yeah,
he got to hang out in heaven.
You know what we don't get after Jesus raised Lazarus from the grave? We don't see the BFFs hanging out anymore after that.
He's kind of ticked off at Jesus.
Why did you do this to me? Yeah. Incredible skit.
Well, that brings up another misconception. We're talking about heaven, because I've heard Christians say this before: is so-and-so, they passed away, but I know that they're an angel in heaven. Yeah. You don't become an angel.
Nope,
you are you. Like that is.
Yeah.
I've made the comment: if they say that to him, smack him across the face, because that's
not how it is.
Well, don't smack him.
Well, God created us above the angels.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're insulting you whenever they say
you are greater than an angel when you get to heaven.
Yeah.
There is it Isaiah where it talked, because you had brought up I know people in heaven, and I've told people we believe marriage till death do us part. Yep. I think that there's very strong biblical evidence that you won't be married. Why? Because God gave us marriage for this world, for us to get through this world. We don't need marriage in the next world, because
there's no more fruitful and multiplying.
Yeah,
it's done.
That was the one command in the garden that is not going to apply when we get to heaven.
See, but here's my question. And,
now, in that sense, we will be like angels because we're not procreating.
Be like angels.
Angels don't procreate. Yeah. That's about the only similarity.
But other than that,
there is no other.
So this, but this is what it is, because Emily really is my best friend, and in heaven, totally different realm, and we are the bride of Christ. So we're fully united with Him, and Jesus answers this question, like you're talking about heaven or marriage in heaven. What does that even mean? But I am curious, because Jesus is very specifically describing, once you become married, you are now one flesh.
Yeah.
So how does that look like on the other side? Like, if we are one with each other, what does that look like to be united? Because again,
what flesh?
The woman was taken out of the man.
Yeah.
And when they come back, and so she was created, but when they come back together, they are one. And so, whenever we go to heaven, are we one?
When we say flesh, when God commanded flesh, what's the context of one flesh there? We're talking about I take that as saying the physical bodies that we have now, that is the flesh that becomes one. And of course, he's using flesh figuratively because
Yeah.
when we say I do, Caitlin and I did not like engulf into each other and become one person. It's the idea that you two will be one, that all decisions, everything that occurs, you do as one. I think it's almost a figurative way of saying that marriage, describing marriage in this world. I don't believe, and there's what would Jesus, I wish I had the verse in front of me, but Jesus makes it very clear. Let me find it real quick.
Yeah, when he's talking to at the end of his life, when he's talking to them.
Yes, but I want to make sure. Is it in Mark? I should know this. Give me a second.
Well, while you're looking it up, I want to highlight what Luke was
Matthew
just talking
22.
about.
It's Matthew 19.
That we are one flesh, and that the woman is of. We are all created of the same. The Old Testament in the creation story tells about Eve being made. We always think of it from a rib.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give a good friend Dana Evans a shout out. She sent me this, in that the Hebrew does not typically mean rib. It means a side, a flank, a half, or structural side of a building or sacred object. And the same word that is used for, that we translate to rib, is also used for the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle, and a mountain. And so it's not a small bone; it is a complete half portion of a man. So removing a rib God did not remove a rib like a surgeon. It described God taking a side of the human. Let's see here. God divided the primordial human into two equal halves. And so that better fits the whole, human, not male, humanity as being one first. He didn't. So it's fascinating that we think that women was just made from a rib.
Yeah.
And no, he literally split man in half.
Yeah.
And created two
Sure.
very like beings.
Yes.
And that's how much similar we are.
I
Yeah,
found
and
that.
that's
Let me-
what
let me-
rib.
I've been looking for that. So you're right, Matthew 22. And this goes back to the whole angels thing. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. So he outright says it, but are like angels in heaven, like angels in heaven. So he's using a simile. He's not speaking literally when it comes to the angels in heaven, but he's not using a simile. He's not being analogous when he says, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. So that's
It's just the only comparison.
And I agree that the marriage covenant, it's fulfilled by the time we get to heaven. And our deepest relationship, the only one that we will have on that level, is our union with Christ. But it does make me wonder if we are
Something
we're
unique
back
there.
to one. Like,
Once again, those are the questions we don't have the.
But I think the role of marriage in this world, in our world, again, flea brains, what we need in on this side of heaven, I don't know if obsolete is the right word. I don't think it's going to be necessary.
I do think we'll recognize people though, because you look at the
I do, but is that Joshua?
You look at the Transfiguration, and
Or Isaiah?
there's definitely some recognition. They can recognize things.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to your whole marriage thing. I think it's a reflection of God's relationship with His people. Marriage is another reflection of Christ and the church. And because he talks about how Israel is adulterous and how they have gone against him and they've cheated on him. He talks about that kind of a cheating type language, that they've gone to follow other gods and they're adulterous in doing that. I think the marriage it's a reflection of God's covenant with humanity, and then is then passed down to us and our relationships with one another, and then is again a reflection of Christ and the church. So whether that then carries on, I don't know, but it's definitely a reflection
taking
of
it
God
back
and
to
His plan
heaven.
and
So
covenant.
our good buddy Pastor Larry over at Lebanon Family, I remember he preached on this passage. It's probably been 3 years ago. The only reason I remember it is I remember Lebanon Family's comment section was exploding because people were upset at what he said. I listened to the message. I actually don't disagree with what he said. And again, shout out to Larry and Lebanon Family. We love them. But Isaiah 65:17, talking about the new heaven and new earth. See, I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. And so that is the verse where people say, well, okay, former things, because I've even asked, I had another best friend that passed away. I don't think he was saved. Let's assume he wasn't saved. Well, I remember him when I get to heaven, because that's a question I've gotten before. I have a loved one that died. I can't imagine heaven being perfect if I don't have this person in my life. Even a child that I know was not saved and they died. Why would I want to go to heaven knowing that my child is not there? And I think that speaks to, well, the things that may harbor sadness or disdain or anger towards God. Why wouldn't you allow my child or my spouse to be here who was unsaved? that there are certain things in this world that will not be remembered when we get to heaven. For reasons that we may not know. So the whole sermon that Larry preached on was the idea of, yes, there will be people, there will be loved ones that you will have no recollection of in heaven. And of course, people got fired up and said, well, how in the world could that be the case? So it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah. That's fascinating. But look why do we have memorials? Why do we have special days for holidays? To remember, to force us to remember. We don't, because how many times has someone's passed away and they are forgotten about because we just keep moving forward in a direction of down the line. And it's like history. If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So you need to remember history. That's just a very common thing here today, even as we live. We have to have memorials and we have to have special days to go. And Jesus even said, do this in remembrance of me, because you're going to forget if you don't,
So the idea is that it would only make sense that there are certain things that you will not remember. And again, flea brain, well, that I can't imagine. You're right. You can't imagine.
Yeah, you can't. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, we talked about Hades, the holding place. That's why in when Paul writes to the church of Thessalonica in 1 Thessalonians, when we talk about the dead will rise, and we always go to this verse when we talk about the rapture.
They thought they missed it.
Yeah, we got 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 17. It says, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead of Christ will rise first." Yep. So the dead in Christ. And so talking about that place of Hades, the first people that will rise are those who have passed before them as Christians. And it's like almost like from oldest to newer believers. And it says after all the dead in Christ will rise, that's when he will then come, and those who are left, they will be
those that are still alive.
They will then be called.
It's just so incomprehensible.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
If you are alive when Jesus returns, guess what you're going to watch? A bunch of dead people coming.
Like Thriller.
That's going to be wild.
The human brain can only do so much to imagine what that's going to be like.
Well, that even happened when Jesus arose from the dead. There were other dead people that came to life, people that they knew and were renowned people.
It's a part of
in Matthew. You're just like, what?
It's the part of the resurrection story on Easter.
Nobody talks
we
about.
Always skip past the fact that there were other graves that were open, and we always skip past that. But it is a fascinating detail of the resurrection story.
And it sounds like it's in the context of when he dies on the cross, the graves were open. But Matthew's kind of lumping a lot of things together there. But could you imagine? You're like, whoa. Hold on. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Can you imagine how freaked out people had to be when they saw it?
Yeah. Just a glimpse of what
coming to life.
Just a glimpse of what's
so
to come.
Now imagine that on a massive scale of everyone that has died up until the point that Jesus comes back. I mean, how many millions, billions of people
Do you think
died?
atheism will exist when that happens? All right, checkmany.
Too late. It's too late.
Yeah, there will be no atheists at that point.
That is going to be the wildest. I mean, I don't even know how many people have died in history. I don't know. It's got to be billions. But then some people say there's more people alive than have ever died. So
no, I think depending on, that would be interesting to see. But we're talking a number that is incomprehensible. That is going to be rising.
Now come out of the grave.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So a couple questions. I know we got to wrap this thing up. That people have. Who gets to go to heaven? For us, it's anybody who calls upon the name of Jesus, that believes that he is Lord. They get to go to heaven. But I think it does bring up a question. This one kind of hits home for a lot of people. My mom, she had a miscarriage, and 20% of all pregnancies, they end either where that baby is lost. 20%, that's a significant number. So what about those that lose a child? Where do those babies go, or kids that maybe pass away before they can even talk or understand or know those things? What do we believe about that? Do they get to go to heaven?
Yeah, I believe they do. We were talking earlier about this age of accountability, and there's kind of this sweet area of a child that children are very, even though, little kids do things wrong, but there's a point in our lives where we grow up and we have the ability to truly know what we are choosing. And what I mean by that is, are we going to choose Christ, or are we going to choose this world?
And by age of accountability, you're not saying there's like an time, like there's not like, hey, at 12 years old,
there's a big debate.
I don't even use the word age of accountability. I use the word intellect accountability because
there's no specific. You're at the age of 12, you should know.
But I would even say people that have severe developmental or mental retardation, stuff like that, that could live to be 50 but have the mind of a 1 or 2 year old, they're going to heaven.
I believe so.
100%.
And so how do we know that?
Well, and that's just it. We don't know, but I think I'd have to go do some more digging to find out where Jesus may have said something. But
Well, David in the Old Testament.
I'll have to admit that. Well, yeah, he thought
Psalm,
that his son went to
son,
heaven.
and he talks about his son being in heaven, and his son certainly would have been under the age of what we would call an accountability. Did not have the intellect
to make a decision.
But David affirms that he is in heaven, and so that to me would be actually pretty concrete proof biblically.
Yeah.
Unless David was just outright wrong that his son was in heaven, even though he did not make a decision.
And then I think obviously you can go into Jeremiah 1. It says before you were
1:5,
in your mother's womb I knew you. And then I think one of the strongest examples we get is John the Baptist. As
leaping in
the womb.
So we see humanity, and when Elizabeth and Mary leaping for joy.
But we already see John having the Holy Spirit. In that moment, it says that he had the Spirit and he leaped in that moment.
Yep.
And so I think all of that shows the evidence of, and we know God's character.
Yeah.
And his heart for children, and that he's a God of love.
Yeah.
I think when you tie all those things together, I think you can almost say for sure, they're going to heaven.
And I talked about this in my apologetics class. Do we believe that life begins at conception? Yes, scientifically and theologically we do.
Yeah.
So we believe that in conception, so even an early miscarriage, we believe that a conceived, we use the word fetus or embryo, but that is a human being.
That's correct.
Do all humans spend eternity somewhere, yes or no? Yes.
Yeah.
Therefore, that's a deductive argument to say that even those who miscarry, and we've walked with many women who have miscarried in our church, and the one hope I have for them is that, you may not have known personally that baby that was living inside of you. Maybe you've named him or her already, but the fact is that you will be united with your child, whether it be a child that died in the womb or out of the womb. We have that assurance. We have that hope.
Yeah.
That's good. And I heard a pastor say this once, because it's not just ones that are miscarried. It's ones that are aborted. And I heard this pastor say, I have a picture of heaven being full of babies that were aborted that God adopted.
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe that without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, we were talking about earlier with regards to people that have experienced another side because they died and then came back to life. It's a very famous book, is Heaven for Real? Or
That's one of them.
There's some people that discount that book and the story of that young
Is that
boy.
the pastor? Or no, that's
It's the pastor's son.
Yeah.
Okay.
That died on the operating table with your appendix had burst. And anyways, the little boy describes to his parents. He says, "Oh, I saw my sister, and this was her name." He knew who she was, and the dad and the mom had never told him about a miscarriage that they had prior to him coming to life, them having him. And he told about how he saw her. Yeah. And they were just like, and then he also talked about how many babies there were in heaven. And it's kind of fascinating. Now, is that real? I don't know. Yeah. It's an experience that somebody had of heaven and then explain those things. And it's kind of a comforting thing to be like, okay, what this kid was telling, the way the book lays out is like, there's no way he would have known. He even saw his uncle and never met his uncle. He knew.
And on that, and this is the last story I share on this, but I've shared this before. The checkmate for me when I was an atheist is I was speaking with a local pastor, and I asked him all my questions of why God did not exist, why atheism was true. I mean, question after another. And he's responding the best he can. And then I asked him, I said, "Do you have any questions for me?" And he said, "I only have one question for you." He said, and he shared a story. There was a family that had a late miscarriage. And he said that he goes into the hospital room. He said, mom is sobbing, dad is crying. He knows that they're believers. He said that the only thing he could tell them was that child that died in your womb, you will see them again. You will be united. You will, all of those things. And he said it gave them hope. He said, "Now, Roger, you're now in my shoes. You're the one in the hospital room. What answer do you give them?" And that's the one thing that stumped me. What hope do you give them? And my answer was, I guess I just tell them that's that, right? And so this idea,
cruel, though.
right? And that was it. Like, it's just, that was my worldview of like, there's nothing you can. It's nihilism. We're here and then we're not. And the idea that in that pastor talking to me, who was as hardened of an atheist as I could have been, but the idea that we have the hope that he could tell that family that was distraught because anybody that's been through a miscarriage, you grieve that loss as if it is your child, because it is your child.
Yeah.
Scientifically and theologically, you have lost your child. And the hope you can give them is at an eternity that is so great that the word miscarriage won't even exist. It won't even be comprehensive. And that actually, for me, was one of the things that made me stop and say, man, where is my hope?
Yeah, you know, I was talking to a mom who had a miscarriage, and she said, you know, eventually I found my hope in Christ and my trust in him. And what helped me get through that was knowing that my child never had to experience the hopelessness of this world.
Yeah.
Never had to
In the
experience
evilness of this world.
And
I
that's
said,
what-
man, what a perspective.
That is a perspective, and we kind of forget it. We look at the bad side. That person or that child didn't get to experience life, and you're kind of like, they're lucky.
And,
They're
and
very
I imagine
lucky.
God in his divine foreknowledge, knowing every road that's going to be, that could have looked down and seen a potential path that was going to happen,
Yeah.
and said, you know what, you're closer to heaven than you think. I'm going to go ahead. You know,
Yeah.
just in that idea of like, oh yeah, God's in control. God knows the beginning, middle, and end,
Yeah.
and he's going to do everything he can to make sure and save that life and preserve that life and have that life in his presence.
Yeah, I remember driving to the hospital after someone lost their child in a car accident. And I remember we were praying. We didn't know at the time they're in the hospital in intensive care, not knowing if they were still alive or not. And we were praying, obviously, that they stay alive. And then after we prayed, I literally, and this was riding up there with Pastor Matt, I said, is that selfish of us to pray that they stay here and not get to go to heaven? And in my mind, I'm just like, whoa, where did that come from? And how crazy of a thought is that? It was almost like we were selfishly asking someone to stay in this crappy world when they have an opportunity to go be with Jesus.
And what I tell grieving families all the time is some people are just more ready for heaven than others. And I think that God can see, and it said, hey,
it's your time.
It's your time.
You've done what I've asked.
And we see it as a punishment. Why would God allow it? But on the other side, we're going to look back and think, man, what a reward.
What a reward.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird for us to comprehend here on this side. There's so much that we just don't get.
Exactly.
Well, there you go. I think that's
It was
it.
a good 1 hour.
Yeah, no, heaven so important to us. Obviously, like, it's our purpose. It's like, that's where we're going. And then how many people can we bring with us?
That's right.
And so,
That's what Jesus is
And that's
asked
why
us to
we
do.
say make heaven crowded.
yeah,
And Jesus wants as many people there as possible.
that's right.
Yes.
He loves us that much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He grieves when those with the freedom to choose do not choose him, but he's a loving God, and the definition of love is it must be freely given, that he wants us to love him freely on our own accord, and he rewards us plentiful when we give him our love.
That's right.
It's good stuff.
Yep.
All right.
All righty. Well, hey,
loved it.
great episode. I think I think we covered a lot about heaven, and I think that can be a resource we can send to people. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on Sunday. We're going to continue in our sermon series of Rediscovering Jesus. We're also here on Wednesday, our apologetics class that I'm hosting. Jordan's got a class. We've got Rob's Bible class. We've got a women's class. We've got students. We've got children's. We've got all kinds of stuff on Wednesday night. So we hope to see you then. But if not, we will catch you next week. Same time, same location for Make Heaven Crowded.